My name is Catherine Ellis, 36 years old, and I own a small antique shop in the historic district of Savannah, Georgia. To outsiders, I lead a simple life. I wear old sweaters, drive a Subaru that's over 10 years old, and spend my days dusting items most people would call junk. But in my family's eyes, I'm the disappointment wrapped in the body of a single woman with no children, no real career, and certainly no prestigious degree to flaunt each Thanksgiving. My father, Mr. Harrell, was once a branch manager at a local bank, proud of his belief that credit score matters just as much as character. My mother, Mrs. Nancy, was a former public high school principal who believed that every child could succeed as long as they chose the right school, the right major, and married the right man. Their golden child, my sister Lauren, was the perfect example. She graduated with honors from Stanford, became a lawyer for a major pharmaceutical company in Chicago, married an orthopedic surgeon, and had 2 kids in private school who started golfing at age 7. Their Christmas cards looked like magazine covers, matching sweaters, gleaming teeth, and all. And me? I chose to study art history at Georgia State University. While Lauren entered courtrooms, I spent hours in libraries, reading old manuscripts and admiring 18th century furniture. Art is lovely, my mother once said, but it doesn't pay the rent. I still remember the way her hand trembled slightly when she folded my college application shut in disappointment. After graduating, I worked for 3 years as an assistant at an auction house, quietly learning how to distinguish true walnut from veneer, how to read the signs of artificial aging, and how to identify a lamp's era, whether Art Deco or mid-century modern. I remember coming home excited about a mispriced piece I'd spotted, nearly $3,000 undervalued. My father just muttered, "Sounds like a gamble." At 28, I emptied my savings, borrowed a small sum from a friend, and rented a tiny red brick storefront tucked beneath the old oak trees on Whitaker Street. I named the shop Ellis & Era and displayed each Queen Anne chair like a shrine to time itself. On opening day, my mother brought a plastic bouquet, looked around, and whispered to her best friend, "Hopefully she snaps out of this before she hits 30. From then on, I became the side character at every family gathering. Each holiday was a stage play, with Lauren in the starring role, the brilliant lawyer, the devoted mother, the ideal wife. Meanwhile, I got asked, "Is the shop still open?" Or, "Have you thought about substitute teaching?" Once, I overheard my father sigh to my uncle, "At least she's not asking for money." What they didn't know was that every piece I sold was a memory revived. An English silver tea set worth over $2,000 once kept me up all night, terrified I'd misjudge its value. A 19th century music box I quietly passed to a customer made her cry when it played the tune her mother used to hum in 1945. They only saw dust. They never saw the history. But the most painful part wasn't their dismissal. It was the constant sense that I was never enough. No matter how hard I tried, I remained Catherine, the wayward daughter, unmarried, Ivy Leagueless, with no framed accolades for my mother to brag about at Tuesday morning prayer group. And I accepted that supporting role. At least from there, I was left in peace. I never told anyone, not even my closest friend, that one of the very first items I sold at Ellis & Era quietly opened an entirely new world for me. It was a 19th century French pendulum clock, buried deep in a dusty storage shed on the outskirts of Savannah. The owner just wanted to clear out the junk, and I bought it for $30, along with a skeptical look after a week of meticulously cleaning off the mold, oiling the movement mechanism, and researching the engraved markings underneath. I discovered it was a limited edition by L. Leroy and C., custom made for a French general during the reign of Napoleon III. 3 months later, that clock sold at auction in New York for $48,000. I didn't spend a single dime of it. I opened a private investment account and used the business entity to separate personal and company assets. From that moment on, I realized my passion wasn't just about emotion. It was a precise tool to generate value. I didn't need my family's approval. I needed time, patience, and the ability to see what others overlook. I began waking early on weekends to attend state liquidations, especially in historic homes along the southeastern coast. I discovered that many wealthy families in Charleston, Beaufort, or St. Augustine had no one knowledgeable enough to properly appraise old keepsakes when downsizing. Armed with a notebook and an artifact code scanner, I trained myself to distinguish between glued together furniture and true colonial craftsmanship. Authentic engravings from the Federal era versus cheap reproductions from the 1970s. I sat on maps, handheld map mount. One of the most memorable finds happened in Jacksonville. An elderly couple was selling their late father's private library. He had been a retired college professor. Among thousands of books, I found a rare woodblock print, an original 1837 edition, annotated by a British historian who had written about the War of 1812. I paid $125 for the entire box of books. 6 months later, after verifying the signature and historical context, the print sold to a museum for $210,000. Wins like that don't happen every day, but even just a few pieces a year, combined with steady, smaller transactions, were enough to steadily grow my investment portfolio. I didn't keep anything under my real name. I formed an LLC called Camellia Holdings, hired a private financial advisor in Atlanta, and gradually, I bought the very building where my shop was located. Not just the shop, but all 3 apartments above it, an office next door, and even the parking lot in the back. Everything was under the LLC's name. No one in my family knew. They still believed I was scraping by, barely getting through, or keeping the shop open for fun, and I let them believe it. I lived simply, not because I had to, but because I chose to. Most of my clothes were carefully curated vintage pieces. Some I got for $20 at flea markets, but made from French jacquard fabrics from a century ago. My car was an old Subaru, but lovingly maintained and filled with memories. I didn't drink wine that cost hundreds of dollars, but I did own a first-generation set of Baccarat crystal glasses I bought cheap from a pawn shop that had no idea what they were selling. Each year, I traveled to Europe once, usually in the fall, officially for buying trips, but truly, it was to spend a few weeks among the museums of Florence or Vienna, reading old books in the tucked-away shops of Bruges, and walking through Paris rain just to watch the streetlights shimmer on the cobblestones. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I arrived at my mother's house around noon on Thanksgiving, carrying a homemade pumpkin pie and a set of old crystal glasses I had just polished. Every year I brought Lauren, a small gift with historical value, and every year she would set it aside without a second glance, then launch into tales of her latest contract, newest project, or upcoming family vacation in Hilton Head or Aspen. My mother's home in Athens, Georgia hadn't changed. Carefully trimmed garden, interiors styled like something out of Southern living. The smell of butter and cinnamon drifted from the kitchen. Lauren had arrived early. Her sleek black SUV took up the entire cobblestone driveway. I parked down the street, where the leaves hadn't been raked. "Well, look who's here," Lauren smirked as I walked in. "Good thing you didn't keep the shop open today, huh, Catherine?" I smiled and said nothing. I had left the new assistant in charge. But Lauren wouldn't understand the concept of delegation. To her, if you weren't clocking in 8 hours a day, you weren't really working. We helped Mom set the table. She handed me a bag of raw potatoes. "Can you peel these, sweetie? Your sister's handling the plating." I sat at the kitchen table, quietly doing my part, just like every year. My father walked in with a bourbon in hand, greeted Lauren with a wide grin, and gave me a nod, barely glancing in my direction. "How's the store, Catherine? Still open?" "Same as always, Dad," I replied evenly. "Had some interesting pieces last month." He said absent-mindedly, already tuned in to Lauren, who was mid-story about a multi-million-dollar medical lawsuit. I caught words like breach of contract, corporate liability, and board meeting. Mom ladled gravy, nodding proudly. Around 3 p.m., we all gathered at the table. The chandelier cast a warm golden glow, and the scent of roast turkey, cranberry sauce, and bread filled the room. Everything seemed to be unfolding like every other year. Until Lauren said, "Where's my phone? It must have died." I looked up. My phone was on the kitchen counter, where I'd left it while rinsing fruit. Before I could react, Lauren grabbed it, swiped the screen, and scrolled through my notifications. Seconds later, her face went pale. Her voice sliced through the cozy atmosphere. What the hell is this, Catherine? Everyone went silent. She held my phone up in the middle of the table. The screen was still lit. A notification from Martin, my financial advisor, was visible. Congratulations, your net worth just hit $15.2 million. See you next week to discuss the Charleston investment. My father set his bourbon down so hard it sloshed over the plate. My mother's jaw dropped. Lauren stared at me like she'd uncovered a federal crime, gripping my phone like evidence. You've got to be kidding me, she growled. $15 million? You? That tiny antique shop of yours made all that? I stood up and extended my hand. Give me my phone, Lauren. She pulled back, eyes filled with suspicion and anger. No, you need to explain. Where did that money come from? Are you involved in something illegal? Off-the-books deals? Dirty money? Because if you are, you're dragging the whole family into it. Nothing illegal, I replied calmly, more than I expected. That money is mine. Every cent came from the work you always call playing with old junk. My father cut in, voice shaky. Is this real, Catherine? You really have $15 million? I nodded. The whole room froze. One moment we were offering blessings for Thanksgiving. The next, I felt like I was on trial in a family courtroom. Lauren exclaimed like she'd caught a traitor. All these years, you let everyone think you were broke. Had mom worried about your retirement? Had dad constantly asking if you needed a teaching gig? Meanwhile, you've been sitting on a fortune like some silent queen, saying nothing. My mother whispered to herself, dazed. She goes to the grocery store in worn sweaters, gives the kids secondhand books, uses a cracked phone. And she's a millionaire. I took back my phone and slid it into my pocket. No one ever asked. No one ever really listened when I talked about my work. I wasn't hiding it. You just never cared unless it was about Lauren. Lauren let out a cold laugh, sharp as steel. Well, great, but now you know. We're going to have a lot to talk about after this meal. And as I looked around the table, from my father's wary eyes to the twitch in Mom's brow, I knew dinner had only just begun. We ate in silence. The turkey grew cold on the plates. The gravy thickened into a dull brown smear. No one touched the roasted sweet potatoes my mom always prided herself on making from the family recipe. Every conversation at the table had been swallowed by that $15.2 million figure that had just surfaced in a random notification. No one said congratulations. No one acknowledged the years I'd quietly worked alone. There was only stunned silence and schemes starting to take shape. Of course, Lauren was the first to speak. You know, she began, setting her utensils down, her voice soft as mist but sharp as a scalpel. Sophia has this chance to study violin at a music academy in France. It's a competitive spot, Catherine, but tuition and living expenses are almost impossible to afford. If you helped, she could make her dream come true. I looked up and met her eyes. Are you asking me for money? It's not asking, Lauren replied, unblinking. We're family. You have it, and I need it. Call it reasonable sharing. My dad nodded, as if that made perfect sense. My mom sipped her water, then added, You live alone, no kids, no education or daycare costs. Helping out isn't a burden, right, honey? Before I could answer, Lauren's husband Jeff spoke up. He rarely chimed in during family talks, but not today. The truth is, Jeff said, crossing his legs, you're letting money sit in an account while your sister is scraping by with tuition, mortgage, and daily expenses. Catherine, you wear secondhand clothes, drive an old car, live in a tiny apartment. Do you really need all that money? I set my fork down. Are you saying because I live simply, I don't deserve to keep what I earned? Jeff shrugged. All I'm saying is, if you're not going to use it, someone else should. What about the work I put in? I asked, keeping my voice calm. All the years of research, learning, investing, taking risks. When everyone mocked that dusty antique thing, I was working in silence. And now, just because a number popped up, everyone feels entitled to a share? Lauren lowered her tone, trying to shift to guilt. Do you even know how much we worried about you? How many nights Mom couldn't sleep, wondering if her youngest daughter could pay for health insurance? You at least owe the family some transparency. I let out a quiet laugh. That's rich. All these years, no one asked seriously about my work. Not once did mom or dad visit the shop, except on opening day. Every time I mentioned a new antique, you all brushed it off. And now suddenly, I owe you something? My mom interjected, her voice now firmer. We're not pressuring you, sweetheart. We're just suggesting that you use your good fortune to help those close to you. I looked around the table. Everyone was watching me like I was a wallet with a heartbeat. 1 minute, two. Then Lauren spoke again, her voice soft but calculated. I'm only asking for Sophia. Maybe a small scholarship. You could even put your name on it. One small act could change her entire life. And after that, I asked. Then it'll be Max, then your mortgage, then mom and dad's roof. What do I become? A bank? An ATM with shared DNA? Jeff sighed, showing impatience for the first time. Catherine, don't be dramatic. You don't need to give it all, just maybe 3 million. That still leaves you with 12 million to enjoy. I turned to Dad, who'd been silent the whole time. What do you think, Dad? He didn't look at me. Your mother's right. We're not forcing you. But don't forget, we all considered helping you when you were struggling. Now, it's your turn to help back. I nodded slowly, a cold, hollow feeling rising in my chest. I had expected surprise. I didn't hope for applause, but at least some recognition that I had worked for it. Instead, they looked at me like a number on a spreadsheet. No one asked what I had learned. No one asked what I wanted. They calculated, divided, and called it love. I looked at the clock. It was close to 4 p.m. I need some air, I said, pushing my chair back. Catherine, my mom called, don't leave in the middle of dinner. I turned back, my voice low but crystal clear. I'm not leaving. I'm reclaiming the boundaries this family just tried to cross. And I stepped outside, no coat, letting the cool wind brush against my neck. For the first time in my life, I felt completely clear. I stood on the porch, fingers gripping the wooden railing. The November chill crept through the gaps in my gloves, but my head burned hot. Inside, the sound of spoons clinking against plates and murmurs growing louder reminded me more of a shareholder meeting than a family dinner. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. 10 minutes later, I stepped back into the dining room. Before everyone continues dividing up my bank account, I said evenly and slowly, I need to make one thing clear. All three turned to look at me like I was some insolent student daring to challenge the principal mid-speech. My money didn't come from luck. No one in this room helped me when I was starting out. No one checked in when I was hauling inventory at 6 a.m. or came home after 12 hours surrounded by dust and the scent of rotting wood. So why does anyone here think they have a say in how I spend it? Lauren leaned back in her chair, arms folded. I'm not saying you didn't work hard, Catherine, but if you love this family, truly love it, then sharing shouldn't be such a burden. I gave a flat smile. I don't lack love. I lack mutual respect. My father put down his bourbon again. Your mother worried about you for years. We had no idea you were quietly saving that much. Because none of you wanted to know, I said. Every time I mentioned my work, someone changed the subject or tossed out, just hang in there a little longer. No one ever truly believed I could succeed. Jeff, now pulling out his phone, maybe to take notes or crunch numbers, looked at me with a quiet, cutting tone. The issue isn't that you have money, Catherine. It's that you hid it. It feels like betrayal. I nodded. If anyone in this house knows what betrayal feels like, it's me. Lauren slammed her palm on the table. Enough! You can't stand there pretending to be righteous while you're refusing to help your own niece. I didn't flinch. Helping is when someone asks with respect. This is a demand. A guilt trip. And it's wrapped in entitlement. My mother, eyes now brimming with tears, whispered, You're tearing this family apart over money. You live alone? No husband? No kids? What are you going to do with that much money your whole life? That question sliced through me like ice. I'm going to live the way I want, I replied, voice hoarse. And if that embarrasses you, I'll take that burden. Lauren stood, scraping her chair against the floor. If you walk out of here today without agreeing to help, Catherine, don't expect things to stay the same. Don't expect birthday invitations. Don't expect to be at my daughter's graduation. I stared at her. You're using your kids to bargain with me? This isn't bargaining, it's consequences. I walked toward the door, grabbed my coat from the hanger. My hands shook from cold and rage, but my voice didn't waver. I'm not saying no because I'm selfish. I'm saying no because I've learned the most expensive lesson of my life. Never give your worth to people who only see it when it turns into money. My father called after me, "You'll regret this. Sooner or later, being alone will catch up with you." I turned my head. I still have family, just not here, and I shut the door. I left my mother's house at dusk, my thin coat no match for the early southern chill. My hands were freezing, but inside I felt strangely clear. No more scraping chairs, hushed whispers, or the calculating glances of my sister and her husband. No more vague words wrapped in concern. Just the sound of my own footsteps on the cobblestone sidewalk. Steady, heavy, then slowly lighter, like each stone was lifting off my shoulders. Back in Ellison era, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I went upstairs, my small apartment above the shop, and sat by the window. From there, I could see Whitaker Street as it lit up. Soft jazz drifted in from the cafe on the corner. Everything looked the same, only I had changed. I checked my phone. A text from Mom. "You hurt us, but I still love you." Lauren said nothing. I wasn't waiting. I put my phone on silent. Not to avoid anything, but as a reminder, the voices that matter don't come in the form of guilt or sarcasm. The next morning, I opened the store earlier than usual, not to sell anything, but to clean, to clear away every trace of what happened the day before. Being treated like a family investment made me want to put everything back in order, both in the shop and in my heart. Jasmine, the college student I hired 3 months ago, came in at 8 a.m., holding a cappuccino and looking worried. "Are you okay? I texted you yesterday, but didn't hear back." I smiled, taking the warm coffee. "Better than you'd think." "And thank you for being patient." Hiring Jasmine was one of the best decisions I made this year. 23, passionate about antique textiles, obsessed with Victorian embroidery details, and blessed with something I once lacked: mentorship. Now I'm the mentor. In the weeks that followed, I poured myself into the store. I started a blog series breaking down the evolution of American wood furniture from the 18th to the early 20th century. Site traffic spiked. Some seasoned collectors began sending thank you notes. One even asked to apprentice with me. I hosted a talk and tea on the first Saturday of the month, inviting loyal customers, older neighbors, and a few university students. We sat among antique pieces, sipped mint tea, and listened to stories about an oak mirror once owned by a nameless female painter from the Civil War era, or a set of glass goblets forgotten in a Charleston cargo hold. No one at those events asked how much money I had in the bank. They asked things like, "Did this box once belong to someone notable?" Or, "How can you tell real hand stitching from 20th century machine work?" They cared about the history, not the profit. One afternoon, while packing up a ceramic piece headed to California, I got an email from a small museum in Nashville. They wanted to partner on a short course about colonial furniture-making techniques. My name was recommended by a university professor I once helped authenticate a 19th century dining set for. That was the moment I realized I was no longer a shadow in Lauren's family. I was my own person, with a voice, an impact, and a community. On a December night, I locked up the store and crossed the street to the bakery, where Mrs. Marie, the 68-year-old owner, was waiting for me, as usual. We sat at the table by the window, sharing warm apple pie and cinnamon tea. She was the first to hire me to appraise antiques for a local event, and the first to tell me, "You've got eyes that notice what others miss. Don't let anyone make you close them." I told her, briefly, what happened at Thanksgiving. She didn't ask for details, just said, "Blood isn't always family. Sometimes family is who you choose." Came home late that night, the wind whistled through the old window panes, but I didn't feel cold. I opened my journal and wrote a single line. No one can cut you off from what you've built with your own hands. I need them, I have me, and the ones who truly see me. January arrived with a chill in the air and quiet, resolute changes. I hung the announcement for my first class on the front window of Ellis and Era. Antique Appraisal and Preservation course begins January 14th, maximum 8 students. Within just 3 days, the class was full. Among the registered names were a 72-year-old lady who adored French porcelain, a retired high school history teacher, 2 college friends majoring in interior design, and even a well-known chef from Charleston who wanted to open a 19th century-themed restaurant. They came from all over the state, bringing with them curiosity and reverence that moved me deeply. In the first few classes, we gathered around a beautifully carved walnut table I'd recently purchased from an abandoned church. I didn't lecture like a professor. I told stories about hidden carvings on the underside of Windsor chairs, the scent of 1920s shellac, and a table once dismissed as junk that turned out to be a rare post-colonial piece. As I watched their attentive eyes light up at each item, I realized I wasn't just teaching. I was passing on a spark. Jasmine, the young assistant I hired, now managed the entire storefront while I taught. She handled bookkeeping, displays, and had even begun learning how to date historical fabrics. One Friday afternoon, right after I wrapped up a session on Brazilian mahogany, Jasmine handed me a green envelope tied with a ribbon. "Open it," she said, her eyes gleaming. Inside was a hand-drawn proposal for expanding into the back of the store, a preservation workshop and a dedicated learning space. "We could do hands-on sessions," she said. "And if you agree, I want to turn this into a small training center for young people who love this field." I sat in silence for a few moments, studying the careful sketches and notes, then looked up and smiled. "Jasmine, you're dreaming big." "Because I learned from someone who dares to dream big," she replied. That evening, I called Martin, my financial advisor. After a brief conversation, we agreed to allocate $250,000 from my investment portfolio to create the Camellia Fund, an annual scholarship supporting students and independent learners with a passion for heritage conservation, antique interior design, or applied art history. The only requirement? A real-world project. By March, we received 43 applications from 11 different states. The first recipient was Lena Martinez, 27 years old, who had dropped out of school due to lack of funds for pursuing traditional woodworking conservation. She had attached photos of pieces she'd restored using historic techniques, along with a handwritten note. "I don't want to profit from what's new. I want to preserve the old so future generations can understand how their ancestors lived." When I called to share the news, Lena burst into tears. "You have no idea. You just saved me from going back to working in a convenience store." That line haunted me for days. I hadn't saved anyone. I simply did what I once wished someone had done for me, believed in my passion when I had nothing else. By late April, the back area of the shop was transformed into a multifunctional space. We called it the archive room, a place for workshops, guest lectures, and rotating student exhibits. Some days, people had to wait outside because it was standing room only. One evening, while restocking the display shelves, a visitor walked in. Amanda, my cousin who had skipped every family gathering for years. She now lived in Asheville, teaching ecology and timber frame restoration at a local college. "I heard about your class through a forum," she said, smiling. "Didn't know it was you. I just wanted to say, you're doing something extraordinary." I invited her in, brewed some mint tea, and after reminiscing about childhood, we discussed collaborating on a course combining material preservation with Appalachian ecology. I used to think my world was limited to 4 walls and antiques, but once I stopped waiting for validation from my family, I found myself connecting with people who truly understood the value of what I did. No certificates, no dinner parties with chilled wine and hollow compliments. I had the community I chose, the career I built, and a voice that no longer trembled under judgment. For the first time in my life, I felt I was living right. Not because I had something to prove, but because I'd found where I truly belonged. Thanksgiving came late this year, not because of the weather. Autumn in Savannah still painted the maples gold, warm and dry, but because I no longer counted the days. No more anxious anticipation, no more bracing myself for November, no more rehearsing how to smile under my mother's chandelier, pretending to belong in conversations that were never mine. This year, for the first time in over 15 years, I was the one inviting. A week before the holiday, I called home. My father picked up. "I was thinking if you two wanted, you could come to Savannah this year. I'll make dinner at my place, just the three of us." There was a small silence on the other end. Then my father said simply, "Your mother would like that." No apology, no emotional tremble, but also no blame. That was enough. On Thanksgiving noon, I welcomed them at the shop. My mother wore an olive green cashmere coat, her hair pinned up, lips painted a soft pink. My father had sunglasses on and a baseball cap. Standing on the front steps under the golden sun, they looked like a fragment from a cracked childhood photo. "Your shop looks so different," my mother said as she stepped in. "It's more beautiful than we expected." I just smiled. "You've never seen it in the afternoon. The western light brings out the wood's depth." My father walked around, fingers grazing the edge of a mahogany table. "How old is this one?" "Circa 1815, I replied. "Cuban mahogany, hand-joined. Used to belong to a shipping family in Savannah." He nodded. No comment. But something in his eyes had softened. I led them upstairs to my apartment. The kitchen had been redone. Oak cabinets, vintage pendant lights. On the table were rosemary roast chicken, mashed potatoes, homemade cranberry sauce, and pecan pie I baked that morning. Nothing extravagant, but every dish was made with care, not for them, but because I wanted to. We ate in a quiet but not tense atmosphere. My father asked about the classes, my mother shared tidbits about the neighbors. No one mentioned Lauren. No one brought up the $15 million or family obligations. When dinner was over, I poured tea and handed over a small white-wrapped box. "A gift, Mom," I said, pushing it gently toward her. Inside was a silver camellia brooch from the late 19th century. I had bought it at a local auction, drawn by its emblem, the same flower as the scholarship fund I had just launched. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her hand slightly trembling. "You know I always loved camellias." "Since I was little," I nodded. "You used to pin a fresh one to your blouse on parent-teacher night. You still remember?" "I remember everything." The room fell quiet for a moment. Then my father straightened his back, set his cup down, and said slowly, "We were wrong to think you had to follow Lauren's path to be successful. I thought it was safer that way." "I understand," I said, my voice calm but steady, "and I need you to understand this too. I don't need praise. I just want to be seen as enough." My mother said nothing, she just nodded, so faintly I almost missed it. After I walked them out around 7 p.m., I stood on the porch watching their silver sedan turn the corner. No tears, no old ache, just one truth. I no longer needed them to become the parents I used to wish for, but I had chosen to speak, not stay silent. I had held my boundary, kept compassion from becoming negotiation. That night I returned to the shop, sitting among pieces from the past, a room where time wasn't discarded but preserved with care. I opened my notebook and wrote the final line of the day. For the first time, Thanksgiving wasn't a test. It was just a dinner between three people, where I no longer had to ask permission to be myself. Maybe my family will never truly understand me, but from now on, they no longer have the power to define me. Catherine's story reminds us that true worth doesn't come from family praise or society's approval, but from the courage to live with purpose and protect our personal boundaries. In a world that often measures success by degrees or titles, she chose a quieter, steadier path and built a meaningful life with her own hands. Sometimes we have to walk away from imposed expectations to find real respect, starting with self-respect. What do you think about Catherine's decision? Would you have done the same in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories about family, courage, and healing.